From MNT-EC, the Micro Nano Technology Education Center, and JATE, the Journal of Advanced Technological Education. This is the JATE Writers Studio. In each one of these sessions, we'll have a guided conversation with a published author, and we highlight authors who publish articles in peer-reviewed journals, just like JATE, so that they can share their story and their writing process with all of you. We want to give authors a voice to share their tips and tricks about how they write peer-reviewed journal articles. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce Irma Vazquez. Irma is a graduate student at the University of New Mexico. We'll discuss Irma's article in JATE, which is titled Initial Observations of a Community College Microsystem Fabrication-Focused Undergraduate Research Experience. And Irma's going to talk about that article and how she constructed it. Irma, welcome and thanks for being with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Irma, so before we talk about writing your JATE article, I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, describe where you live and work, and talk a little bit about your background.
Of course. So my name is Irma Vazquez, and I'm a graduate student at the University of New Mexico. I'm majoring in mechanical engineering. I'm getting my master's this upcoming December, so very soon. I've been doing research in the material science area in mechanical engineering here at UNM, and so I've had the opportunity to work in different clean room settings and also to teach classes inside of these settings. So both research and teaching inside of clean rooms. I've learned a lot in how to better talk to students, grow as a scientist, grow as a researcher. I'm still learning, I have so much to learn, but yeah, that's kind of what I do. I and so now that I've been teaching teaching classes for like a couple of years now in the clean room settings of UNM. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of students, and in coordinating with my mentor, the advisor, Dr. Matthias Pyle, we decided to create a survey, and from that led this paper. So yeah.
Irma, congratulations on the publication of your paper in JATE. Could you just very briefly describe the article that we're going to discuss today? Just a couple sentences. We'll talk more in detail about it in a bit.
Of course, yes. So the article talks about the benefits of hands-on learning in STEM students. Particularly in a clean room environment, which very briefly consists of a highly filtered air environment to prevent any contamination towards samples that we might prepare. So it just talks about what the students can gain from these experiences.
I think this was a wonderful article, and I loved also all the figures and the data that was included in it. But before we go into the specifics of the article, Irma, what's your writing background? How did you learn how to write for peer-reviewed journals?
Of course. So during my bachelor's, I did take a couple of technical writing classes. However, it's different writing an essay geared towards technical class than a peer-reviewed journal. So I started doing research in my bachelor's, and during this, I had to write technical reports, and this is where my writing experience began, like more scientific writing. And then I was with my first advisor for graduate school, and with her, I wrote a review article, review journal article, where I had to review over 160 papers and summarize them and find trends here and there. So through that, I learned a lot of finding resources and how to compile information and how to present data. So by no means have I been in this for like a long time. I'm still, like I said, I'm still learning a lot, but it's been a couple of years of figuring things out in terms of peer review articles. So, yeah.
Irma, for this particular article on the fabrication-focused undergraduate research experience, how did you come up with the idea of the article? What was the first thing that you did? And then you were like, yeah, I'm going to write this one.
Of course. So we have a lot of community college students that come over to UNM during, well, mostly during the summers, but throughout the whole year as well. So they stay here at New Mexico for a week-long time period. So during this week-long time, they go through an accelerated course in our lab, which is where we go through a lot of making samples, different devices, and things like that. So in short, we get a lot of students from different community colleges from all over the US that come here to our university. So talking with my mentor, Dr. Plyo, we were talking how we can really how can we see where we can make things better for the students? And we talked about making a survey. There was no real survey set in place for the students, one that gathered metrics and data in a way that might be helpful towards improving the class. So I took the initiative of creating a survey with my boss, Dr. Plyo. I presented it to him. I did a little bit of research in how to make a survey because there's a whole thing to surveys, and I did not know that before. There's certain even like psychology towards how you phrase questions because you don't want to be leading the students towards like certain answers that you might want to hear. So I took some time in creating a survey, presented it to Dr. Plyo. He revised it. He helped me, gave me some feedback. Um, and when he fully okayed it, when the students started coming in for that year that we initiated the survey, then we started giving out the survey at the end of each class, at the end of each week. So through this, we gathered a lot of data in how to improve and things that might be going right, things that might be going wrong. And after gathering this data, we were like, I think we can present this as a journal article form. So which the topic is perfect for this journal at Advanced Technological Education. So yeah, that's kind of how I was born the survey.
Irma, you mentioned that you worked with Dr. Plyle, who is your faculty mentor, but there are other co-authors on this paper. How did you find co-authors, and what do co-authors do contributing to a paper compared to you, who we would call the first author?
Of course. So each of the co-authors in this paper helped me out a lot in terms of feedback and in my navigating towards reaching the full completed article. Um, I'm the first author. The second author is Dr. Pallavi Sharma. She was also a teaching assistant alongside me throughout these week-long courses, community college students. So she was in there in the clean room alongside me. So she helped in gathering the data. For example, all of the images, as in pictures taken that are presented in the paper, she helped with making those samples. She helped with the science behind each of those samples. So that's why she is second author. She helped in developing what we are teaching in the class. The third author is Dr. Victor Law. He is part of the OILS department in New Mexico. OILS stands for Organization, Information, and Learning Sciences. He is one of the people that Dr. Ply referred me to in terms of revising my survey. Because a lot of his background is on data gathering, survey making. He gave me a lot of feedback. For example, he was mentioning how I should gear different questions towards students versus educators because they have different experiences when they come to UNM. So he was a person who helped me out a lot in forming the survey question. Dr. Nathan Jackson is another of my mentors here at UNM. He is also another person who helped with all of the creating of the scientific methods that we used and taught the students. For example, as I mentioned, we made different micro devices, including micro pressure sensors, micro needles, microfluidic channels, a bunch of MEMS stuff. MEMS stands for electronical mechanical systems. Um, so he then, which is what his background is on. So he helped develop a lot of the science. And finally, the last author is Dr. Plyo, my mentor and the person who leads all of these um, um, community college workshops, undergraduate research experiences. And he was the one who helped me in this actually becoming a paper. But yeah, each of these people, um, while I did a lot of the, like the actual writing, I couldn't have really done it without all of their help and knowledge.
Irma, you mentioned that a survey of students was a big part of this paper. What did you do first when you decided and sat down to write? What was your very first step of writing the paper?
The first step was, is it gonna be just like yes or no questions, or how the main thing I was trying to answer is, how do I quantify how much students have learned? Because that is a very difficult question. Since this is a technical, educational, technological article, I had to spend some time thinking, how do I present this information in graphs? Um, so Dr. Plyle told me about using a Likert scale, which basically is a scale of 1 through 5, one being like, for example, least likely, 5 being most likely, things like that. So I I was questioning what information would I need. Um, so before I made my survey questions, I came up with like 2 or 3 main research questions. It was in answering these research questions that I made my survey. Yeah, like my survey points and what data to gather. So in short, I made my main research questions, and then from that followed the creation of the survey questions.
Irma, that makes a lot of sense from a workflow perspective. Now, sometimes writers, they feel like they don't have enough, like they don't have enough data, or they don't have enough participants or enough experience, or they don't have enough time, and you can always do more research. How did you know that you had enough to start writing this article?
And you know what? I've also been, I have totally also felt that way. I feel like, you know what, we can explore this and that and just nonstop asking questions. But I think that I realized that, it took a lot of effort to bring all of these students to the University of New Mexico, and now we have all of their accounts and opinions on how the course went. So this is valuable information. And I think it was just um, alongside discussions with my mentor, the realization that this is important, this is tangible information that we can present and that can play into perhaps how other clean room experiences might look as well. So we just analyzed the data that we got and saw what kind of figures, what kind of conclusions we could make. We realized it was good, it was valuable, and we decided to make the paper. Yeah.
So Irma, let's move into actually writing the paper. How do you write peer-reviewed journal articles? Do you write them top to bottom, or do you try to do one section at a time, but not necessarily in order? When you do the actual writing, what's your sequence of steps?
Of course. So the first thing in the journal articles is, of course, an abstract. I can say that I absolutely did not start at the abstract, since the abstract contains a lot of the conclusions. and the general gist of the paper, I absolutely did not start there. I wanted to form my thoughts and conclusions throughout the paper. So first I started with the methodology section because this is information that I already had available. I knew how many students I had. I knew the survey methods that we followed. I knew the scientific procedures that we followed throughout the class that we taught. So that was just compiling of information. After that, I did my results. This is where I just presented my data. So in not really conclusions, it was just data presentation. This is what we have. Um, After that, then I spent some time analyzing and coming up with the discussion. The discussion is where I talked about, what my data means, um, and how I interpreted my data and why. This is where I used more references. It wasn't just my opinion, but based on the data that we have and combining that with the literature that we have read, then we write the discussion. Then I write my introduction because the introduction I think is the part that I put off the longest because it's a lot of just research, and it has not so much to do with the stuff that I'm doing, but what is going on out there in literature, what is presented. So then I went to the introduction. Lastly, I made the conclusion, and then sorry, and then the conclusion, and then the last thing I did was the abstract, where then I compiled all of the main lessons that I learned.
Irma, that was a great explanation, both of the order that you write in, as well as the different sections of a peer-reviewed journal article. Did you create an outline before you got started, or do you tend to just free write when you get started?
I think for me personally, I absolutely need an outline. I need to make bullet points and then expand on each of those bullet points. Sometimes the paper doesn't go exactly as you plan it. I think as I write more, I'm learning that. I think we have to be careful in not reaching, for example, conclusions before analyzing the data. Um, so, um, so yeah, yeah.
Irma, how long did it take to write this paper when you started, not with the fundamental research, but the writing part? How long did that part take you?
So as I said, I've been, I do have peer review articles from before. However, this one, it took me a couple of weeks to finally, conclude because this is different from my usual, writing. Since it's very educational based, I wanted to make sure I took time to gather my references. So it took about 2 weeks before I turned in my first draft to Dr. Plyo, my mentor. He revised it. I had to change a whole bunch of things, and then in another 2 weeks, probably we finalized the final draft, which is the one that we turned in. Mhm.
Irma, once you had your final draft, which is sometimes called the final manuscript, what
Mhm.
was the submission process like? What documents did you need to upload to the journal website?
So I uploaded a letter of support, I believe it's called. Basically, I wrote to the journal um, editors to say, hello, this is my journal, and this is why I think it's relevant to this specific journal. Um, and this is what it's about. Um, I also had to include, um, confirm that I have not published it anywhere else or submitted it anywhere else. So alongside that letter, it was my full manuscript. In this case, I didn't need to submit any sort of supporting materials or anything. Everything was just my main manuscript. But yes, it was these two things.
And then Irma, after the submission to the journal website, what was the peer review process like? What did reading those reviews make you feel like? And what did you do once the reviews came in?
So the first reviews that we got, um, brought up really interesting points and questions that I had not asked myself. Um, and also perhaps missing information in the survey that I had created. So I was kind of I had to take a step back to analyze and go through my manuscript once again with these revisions, and I had to also um, um, answer each review that I had received and answer or specify exactly how I had addressed it or why I am perhaps why I think it should not be changed. Um, but yeah, it was a review. It was a process of addressing all of the review points, sending it back, waiting a couple of I'm not entirely sure of the timeline right now, but perhaps a couple of weeks and then getting it back, and then it was accepted. But yes, it is important for the paper to be peer reviewed to not only gain feedback from different perspectives, but to make sure that it makes sense.
Irma, you're an accomplished author and you've written multiple articles in peer-reviewed journals. What advice would you give to new writers who are starting their first peer-reviewed journal article?
I would say to keep writing and don't be afraid to turn in drafts to your mentor, your supervisor, your teacher, because sometimes I think we get so caught up in making everything perfect that we might be missing out from really, really useful feedback and help that really might guide our paper in the best direction. So I've been super guilty of that, but I think it's also a learning process for me. It's really important to seek feedback and help and also to share our writing with others. So yeah, I think it overall that makes me a much better writer, getting that feedback.
Irma, what's your final call to action for people who are getting started with their first journal article? What kind of encouragement would you give those folks to just get started writing?
I would say that if you um if you believe you you can, you can totally do it. Believe in yourself. You are completely capable of doing this. We have all had some, imposter syndrome, as they say. It's easy to doubt ourselves, but just keep writing and you're going to do great. Just keep going.
Irma, thank you so much for being on the JATE Writers Studio today and talking about your peer-reviewed journal article. I'd like to open it up to anyone else if they've got any questions for Irma about her journal writing process.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, Ruth, what would you like to ask Irma about?
So once you have the idea about the article, how did you know it will fit the journal, the journal topics, or
Mhm.
did you decide this at the end that you have the full article written, that you decide to submit it, or you started with the idea of submitting something to this specific
Mhm.
journal, and then based on that you start writing?
I wouldn't say I started with the idea of submitting to a specific journal. I think more than anything, I analyzed or I try to understand what pieces of information and what my research is about. In this case, I had a lot of information about education, educational results. This particular journal is perfect for the article that I wrote. It's really relevant. However, I would say to look at what is your research about? Is your research about psychology or physics or science or something more specific? There are many journals that you can gear your paper towards. Um, Usually, oh no, sorry, not usually, but sometimes after peer review, a paper can be not accepted into a journal, which is why you can also, keep looking for other ones that are relevant. So in my specific case, I just knew it was about technological education and it was relevant to this one. So yeah, I went ahead and submitted it to this one.
Thank you.
Irma, we've got another question. You explained your process really well, the way that you write. Did you have a question in mind when you were attempting to collect data, or was it more writing about in retrospective after the collection and analysis of the data?
To answer your question, yes, I did have a question in mind when I was attempting to collect the data. The main question I was trying to answer was a how question. How does the community college research experience that we host affect students, or how does that benefit them? How does it help them or assist them in their careers? In what way is it beneficial to them? So in answering this how question, then I made my survey questions. However, when I was writing and going through my data, it was a little bit of a retrospective process, because I was also like, oh, okay, maybe I can write about this too. So yeah.
Irma, we've got another question about time management. It takes a long time to write a paper. How did you schedule your time to write? Do you block off a time each day or as part of the week? Or do you stop doing research for a while and move into a writing mode? How do you get time to write a peer-reviewed journal article?
It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of say a simple sentence that I might have not been able to write before reading 5 papers before that. In my personal case, I do take a break from research, like the lab, but only for a couple of days. I think if I completely block off everything else that I'm doing to write, I'm gonna fall behind on a bunch of other stuff. I did block off 2 or 3 days to fully write. It was just, I'm just gonna work on this paper. However, even after I was still working on it for like another week and a half, I did resume some experiments that I had going on, some other of my responsibilities at work, teaching, continuing teaching. So yeah, I think it's important to allow yourself to block time. I think that's a great time management. But just try not, it's hard to say. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend to block off weeks of a time. There's this one thing called Parkinson's law, which basically states that the amount that a time, the amount that a task, the amount of time that a task takes to complete will expand to fill the time allotted for it to be completed. So if you allocate, if you have one assignment and you allocate 1 hour to finish it, you might likely finish it in 1 hour. But if you will allocate 3 hours to finish it, it will expand to kind of fit 3 hours. So yeah.
Well, Irma, maybe we'll finish up with 2 more questions then. Were there any peer-reviewed journal articles that you read that inspired you to write this one on the undergraduate research experience?
I would say yes. There was one particular one that I found that was really helpful. I'm looking at my references right here. I think it was yes, my reference number 3. I can read you guys the title: The Significance of Practical Training in linking theoretical studies with practice. I think it really helped me in understanding that, education is not just all theoretical. It helps a lot in, and at least in my field of study, mechanical engineering, hands-on learning is really useful and really beneficial to a lot of people. So that particular paper helped me a lot in seeing that and seeing other perspectives of that too.
So Irma, to finish up, what's coming up in your future? What are you doing next, either in terms of research or professionally?
So right now I'm a part of a couple of research projects. I'm moving towards finalizing them as my graduation is coming up. I'm part of a lot of things here at UNM, so I'm trying to finish not only my research projects, but help others in finalizing theirs, since I'm trained in a lot of equipment around the lab. And then the next step is job hunting, which is a little nerve-wracking, but I think it's something that I'm also excited about. Right now there's a lot of there's not a set plan. Like I know exactly this is the path my life is gonna take, but that's okay. Yeah, just kind of job hunting at the moment.
Well, Irma, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your story, and all of your tips for writing peer-reviewed journal articles today at the JATE Journal Writers Studio.
Thank you very much for having me.